Explore the seedy underbelly of the motorcycle subculture as we delve into the history of the renowned Hells Angels and the people who have made a name for themselves in the annals of notoriety. These 10 people have carved out a niche for themselves in the annals of history, and they've done it with the rumble of their Harley-Davidson engines and the flash of their leather jackets emblazoned with the Notorious Death's Head logo. Who were these mysterious people that the police and other gangs were so afraid of? Number 10. George Weathern. One of the most dangerous Hells Angels to ever ride into town was named George Weathern, whose name will go down in criminal history as indelible. Weathern was forged amid the grit and mayhem of 1960s counterculture, which itself had its roots in the mean streets of Detroit. The bloodshed and anarchy that accompanied his rise to notoriety painted a vivid picture of a wild existence. Weathern's criminal history was a complex tapestry held together by his membership in the violent Hells Angels motorcycle club. His record was a macabre collection of criminality, including drug trafficking, extortion, and horrible brutality. In one particularly infamous instance of his criminal behavior, he arranged a brutal ambush after a failed cocaine trade. Weathern was an expert at operating undercover, and his activities went much beyond simple street crime. Word on the street was that he had deep ties to the criminal underworld, specifically with ruthless syndicates. Although law enforcement was always on the lookout for Weathern, he somehow managed to avoid capture by showing off a mysterious dexterity that allowed him to slide through the gaps. Where George Weathern is at this time is still a tantalizing mystery. It is said that he has disappeared into thin air, his evasive nature making him impossible to catch. Number 9. Alan Passaro. From meager beginnings, Alan Passaro became one of the most threatening personalities in Hells Angels history, and his name resounds in the annals of legendary motorcycle gangs. Passaro's rise from an unremarkable kid to a dreaded enforcer was as shocking as it was unbelievable. He was born to a middle-class household in 1948. Passaro's illegal activities were many and well-known, spanning from the illicit drug trade and extortion to acts of severe violence. In 1969, at the site of the now-famous Altamont Free Concert, a terrifying occurrence occurred. Passaro, a Hells Angel, was involved in a fatal fight with concertgoer Meredith Hunter. Passaro fatally stabbed Hunter in the ensuing mayhem, ensuring his place in history. It's safe to say that Passaro's life was a tangled web of illicit activities and run-ins with the law. His reckless antics frequently landed him in legal trouble and resulted in multiple arrests and convictions. His ability to stay under the radar helped him avoid lengthy prison terms, but it also left a wake of unanswered questions and unsolved crimes in his wake. On March 29, 1985, Alan Passaro was found dead in Anderson Lake. The police had their suspicions, but they were never able to prove any wrongdoing. Number 8. Paul Eischeid. Stockbroker Paul Eischeid was also a member of the Hells Angels motorcycle club. Eischeid and other members of the Hells Angels gang were responsible for the death of Cynthia Garcia, a 44-year-old mother of 6, in October 2001. While under the influence of alcohol during a party held at the Hells Angels clubhouse in Mesa, Arizona, Garcia openly insulted the group and its members. They put her in the trunk of a car and abandoned her in the middle of the Arizona desert. Eischeid was arrested in 2003 on charges of drug trafficking and racketeering, as well as kidnapping and murder charges dating back to 2001. Due to Eischeid's limited criminal history and stable employment, the judge granted him federal pretrial release with electronic monitoring following his arrest. But before his trial, he removed his electronic monitoring bracelet and disappeared. It is believed that while on the run, Eischeid procured a false passport and a new identity. He even altered his physical look by gaining weight, growing a goatee with a beard that reached his chest and going bald on top. In 2011, 15 years after he had first fled the country, Eischeid was discovered and arrested by authorities in Argentina. For 7 years, Eischeid avoided extradition to the United States, turning to Argentina for help. His rights had been exhausted, and he was eventually taken into custody and lodged in the Maricopa County Jail. Number 7. Michel Janist. From the mean streets of Montreal sprang one of the most fearsome men to ever wear the famed Hells Angels emblem. His name echoes through the annals of criminal history. His background is steeped in mystery. Rumors about his turbulent upbringing and rebellious nature blend with the shadowy realm of organized crime. The destruction caused by Janist's decades-long reign as a criminal is still being felt today. His reputation as an unstoppable force of evil was cemented when drug trafficking, extortion, and violence became hallmarks of his criminal organization. The Lennoxville massacre, however, is what truly cemented his place in history books. In the dead of winter of 1985, anarchy broke out atop the Hells Angels' chain of command. Many of Janist's gang members were killed, while he and other disloyal members plotted to wipe out their rivals. The killings shook the country and shed light on the underlying violence within the outlaw biker subculture. Janist was able to evade justice for a long time despite the seriousness of his crimes by navigating a complex network of bribery and avoidance of the law. Walking a tightrope on the brink of disaster became a way of life for him as he constantly teetered between peril and freedom. Number 6. James Brandes. The name James Brandes echoes through the history of the Hells Angels and is synonymous with danger and notoriety. Brandes, a man with a murky past who emerged from the seedy backstreets of Detroit, made a name for himself in the seedy underworld. Like a twisted symphony, the sins he committed teetered on the edge of mayhem and brutality. In the dead of night on a chilly winter's eve, Brandes revealed his demonic might to the world. A secret mission, planned and executed with military precision, took place in a confusing warehouse. As he commanded a vast drug trafficking operation, narcotics billowed like a sinister haze, trapping people in a never-ending cycle of dependency and sorrow. As much as law enforcement wanted to put an end to his evil reign, they were completely outwitted and confused by his ingenuity. Brandes prospered in the sleazy underbelly of civilization. His membership in the notorious Hells Angels motorcycle gang catapulted him to the top of the criminal world. Due to his intimidating presence, he attracted a legion of followers who were eager to do as he said. There were rumors that he was involved in arms smuggling, extortion, and horrible acts of brutality, and his very name came to be associated with horror. There is one murder that shows how cruel Brandes could be. It was the dark of the moon when another gang ventured to invade his domain. Red paint would be permanently embedded in the pavement after the ensuing massacre. Once living bodies were scattered about in grotesque contortions, forming a macabre scene of dominance and control. Number 5. David Carroll, Canadian outlaw biker and gangster. David MacDonald Carroll, as Wolf, belonged to the elite nomad chapter of the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club in Quebec. He was put in charge of drug distribution in the Laurentian by Maurice Mom Boucher, who had personally recruited him. He eventually became Boucher's go-to assassin and was involved in 15 or more murders. In 1985, 5 members of the Hells Angels motorcycle gang were killed in the Lennoxville, Virginia area, and Carroll was there. He faced first-degree murder charges for his role in the massacre, but was found not guilty in 1987. 2 other Halifax chapter members faced similar charges but were ultimately cleared. Carroll was a pimp in Halifax and took 40% of the money the escorts made before he moved to Quebec. He and 7 other Halifax chapter members were detained and accused of supporting themselves through prostitution. Carroll and the other defendant both received 1-year prison terms. In 1988, Carroll faced first-degree murder charges again for his role in the drug debt-related murder of an adolescent in Dartmouth. He was found not guilty once again. In 1990, he uprooted his family and headed to Quebec to live with his common-law wife and their child. As part of Operation Springtime, 13 counts of first degree were filed against Carroll in 2001. An extradition request was sent to the Mexican authorities at the time, claiming that he was hiding out in Ixtapa. But Carroll and another Hells Angel, André Chouinard, vanished. Carroll was suspected by Canadian officials of having at least $1 million stashed away in an untraceable bank account in Antigua. It is thought that Carroll has escaped to Brazil, a country with which Canada does not have an extradition relationship. Between 2001 and 2009, he was supposedly spotted in the West Indies. Information reveals that Carroll has been to more than 20 countries, including Brazil, Mexico, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, the United States, and countries in South America and Europe. as indicated in the Interpol notice on Carroll. In 2012, Carroll was supposedly last seen in Australia. Number 4. Michel Langlois. Michel Langlois, better known by his nickname Sky, was born in 1946. He went so far as to buy his plane and get his pilot's license, hence the moniker. Langlois entered Popeye's motorcycle club while he was a young man, making him a member of the second-largest outlaw motorcycle gang in Canada, behind the Satan's Choice Motorcycle Club. The club swiftly elevated him to a position of prominence. In 1977, the Hells Angels established the first Canadian chapter of the organization by McPatching Popeye's MC. After joining the Hells Angels Montreal chapter, Langlois advanced to become the club's national president in Canada. His time in office was controversial, however. The Lennoxville Massacre of 1985 also involved Langlois. After 2 years of hiding out abroad to avoid capture, Langlois was found and tried for accessory after the fact to murder. For his part, he was given a 2-year prison term. In 1998, Langlois was arrested for drug trafficking and charged with cocaine importation and conspiracy. He admitted guilt in 3 narcotics charges and was sentenced to 5 years in jail and a fine of $20,000. As part of Operation Shark, Langlois was arrested in 2015 on charges of conspiracy to murder related to the Quebec motorcycle conflict. The Canadian government seized the property on which the initial Montreal clubhouse stood as a result of the operation. Number 3. Robert Chico Mora. The Hells Angels Motorcycle Club tried to root itself in Arizona in the late 1970s, but it encountered opposition from rival biker gangs. When Robert Chico Mora appeared, the situation changed. He was the head of the Dirty Dozen biker gang and decided to join forces with the rival Hells Angels. His murder conviction in 1980, at age 24, cemented Mora's reputation for ferocity. His status as a violent criminal was cemented by this and other unlawful acts in which he participated. While behind bars, Mora developed his boxing talents to the point that he won the Golden Gloves tournament. When he was released from prison, he was 6'3" and about 300 pounds of pure muscle. His criminal record featured several convictions, including drug possession, distribution, misconduct with weapons, and a dismissal of a conviction for wearing body armor. Mora and his Dirty Dozen crew were patched into the Hells Angels in 1984. The relocation was crucial because it allowed the Hells Angels to establish a strong presence in Arizona. He was taken into custody in 1993 on charges of murdering a member of an opposing biker gang. A judge ultimately found him guilty, and he was given a sentence of life in jail without the chance of release. Mora spent his final months in a modest house on the block, where he entertained himself with video games and the petty torture of his pet, a black chihuahua named Chica Ruca. Murder, violent assault, and the distribution of meth were only some of the crimes associated with Mora and the Dirty Dozen. His criminal history and association with the gang guaranteed that he would be seen as a potentially dangerous and violent person. His criminal past and ties to the Dirty Dozen offer a different picture of who he was than the one he presented to his chess partner. Members of Hells Angels respect Mora despite his history. In the club, he is a legend, the subject of frequent whispers. Mora, who had diabetes, passed away on January 1, 2014, at the age of 58. Number 2. Yves Trudeau. Yves Trudeau was a major player in the criminal underworld, and he was known by many aliases. Although he was only 5 feet 6 inches tall and weighed 135 pounds, this Canadian native from 1946 proved to be a formidable opponent. Trudeau first worked with explosives in the 1960s at Canadian Industries Limited. He received education in explosives and went on to use that knowledge to plan further bombs. In the late 60s, when he joined Popeye's Motorcycle Club, his prior expertise helped him quickly rise through the ranks. After the Popeyes were covered by the Hells Angels MEC in 1977, Trudeau joined their Level chapter. Trudeau was known as one of the Hells Angels' deadliest members during his stint with the gang. He admitted to conducting 43 killings between September 1973 and July 1985, making him the most active killer in Hells Angels history. Of the 43 deaths, 29 were caused by firearms, 10 by bombs, 3 by violence, and 1 by strangling. Due to the large number of remains that have been deposited in the northern section of the St. Lawrence River, it has become infamously known as the Hells Angels Graveyard. Some of the high-profile murders in which Trudeau was implicated are those of Robert Coate and Brian Powers. Trudeau barely survived the 1985 Lennoxville massacre while he was a patient at a rehabilitation center. Even though he had been kicked out of the club during his time in rehabilitation, his problems were far from done. He became a government informant following the Lennoxville massacre, frustrated by his cocaine addiction and the belief that his fellow gang members plotted his death. He was given a reduced sentence of life in jail with the possibility of parole after only 7 years in exchange for his cooperation. In 1994, Trudeau was released from prison under the name Denis Coate. In March of 2004, however, he was apprehended for sexually abusing a minor, resulting in a 4-year extension to his sentence. After receiving a cancer diagnosis in 2007, Trudeau was moved from Archambault Prison to a hospital, where he died in 2008. He is still remembered as one of Canada's most prolific and infamous serial killers. Number 1. Maurice Boucher. Quebec's former Hells Angels Club leader is a Canadian criminal by the name of Maurice Boucher. Boucher, who was born on June 21, 1953 in Quebec, had a difficult upbringing and got involved in criminal activity at a young age. He quit school when he was 15, and he began committing burglaries and armed robberies to finance his drug habit. In 1975, he was incarcerated for armed robbery, and in 1978, he and his brother were apprehended for a string of house invasions. In 1982, he became a member of the SS, a white supremacist motorcycle club that eventually became the Hells Angels. He was a charismatic and skilled gang boss, notorious for his brutal methods and drug dealing. Maurice Boucher joined the renowned Montreal chapter of the Hells Angels on May 1, 1987. He became renowned as a nasty and clever member of the gang quite soon. There were claims that Boucher would eventually control all of Quebec's drug trade after he created a local chapter of the Hells Angels in 1995. This action pitted him against other biker gangs, starting a battle that would eventually claim the lives of 162 people and leave hundreds more wounded. His image as a dangerous criminal was solidified, and the violence he instigated caused widespread destruction and loss of life across the region. Boucher ratcheted up the pressure on law enforcement by resorting to intimidation as their attention turned to the Nomads chapter, but his reign of terror would soon come to an end. Despite accusations that he ordered the deaths of 2 prison officers and the attempted murder of a third, Boucher was found not guilty of all charges in 1998. However, law enforcement was able to interview a confidential source who confirmed that Boucher had ordered the killings. Boucher was deemed guilty and given a life sentence in May 2002. Boucher allegedly got kicked out of the Hells Angels motorcycle club in 2014 when he was incarcerated. It wasn't the only issue he had to deal with in jail either. He and another convict were arrested for attempted murder in 2015 after they allegedly stabbed another inmate. Federal Supermax Jail Special Handling Unit has been Maurice Boucher's home since 2002. The region's reception center houses the Special Handling Unit. In 2022, he died of cancer while a patient in the palliative care ward. Despite his conviction, Boucher is still revered as a powerful spokesman for the Hells Angels. His victims, however, will always remember him as a merciless and heartless criminal who tormented the streets of Quebec. Thanks for watching. If you want more videos like this one, make sure to like the video and subscribe to our channel to never miss out on any of our videos.